Let's dive in. Ambassador Whitaker, you're based in Europe. So what prompted you and your fellow ambassadors to undertake your current defense innovation related and focused trip to the United States, and why now?
Well, we came on this trip to really showcase one thing, and that is American innovation and technology and how it can help the warfighter. We have seen really so many examples of already. We started in Texas, started in Dallas, went to Austin, and then came out to Los Angeles and the surrounding area, and we still have 2 days to go. And we have seen drone technologies, counter-drone technologies. We've seen technology solutions in the radar space. We have seen autonomous sea vessels. We have seen all sorts of American innovation. And it's really, if you think about what's necessary for fighting the next war, but most importantly, making sure that America and our values win if confronted, it is to make sure that we bend the cost curve, that we are technologically advanced so that we can't be challenged. And really, you know, here with the spirit of Ronald Reagan, so palpable in this place, I just have to say, you know, one of your core pillars of this institute and this library is peace through strength. And that's where we are heading right now, is that the peace is guaranteed through the strength of not only the United States, because there is no doubt, if you look at what we have demonstrated in Midnight Hammer and what we did in Venezuela and so many other American capabilities that have been demonstrated and unchallenged, really, it just demonstrates that American strength alone is not going to what's going to secure that peace. It is going to be our allies being equally strong and capable. And we obtained probably the largest, so far the biggest win of this second Trump term was the Hague Defense Commitment, where we went to the summit last year in the Netherlands. All allies in NATO agreed to spend 5% on defense. And that's from where we were with many under 2% and a few over 2%, and some, especially on the eastern flank, spending at 4 or 5%. It just makes a huge difference if all of our allies are strong, because again, this is not about war fighting. This is about peace. This is about making sure we're so strong that we go unchallenged and that we can live with peace and prosperity for everyone that shares our values, that shares our way of life here in the United States and again across Europe and really across the globe. So that's why we did it, and we have just seen some extraordinary things, and we just want to highlight that and then make sure that our allies know that that's available for them to help them be strong as well.
I think it's fair to say that it's been underreported that the administration's posture is to actually embrace the strength of allies, right? Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the national security strategy. One line right in there says, Europe remains strategically and culturally vital to the United States. So the national security strategy underscores the need to revive U.S. defense, the U.S. defense industrial base, produce capabilities of scale, adapt to gaps exposed in recent conflicts. How do you see strengthening Europe playing out, and how does that tie into your trip and what you're seeing with U.S. defense companies?
Well, on the one hand, it's too soon to tell. You know, the political commitment was made last June, and you know we're 6 months into it. But what we've seen is, I would say, some real green shoots of our allies stepping up, but to be strong militarily, you have to be strong economically. And I think one of the biggest challenges for some of our European allies is that their economies or their balance sheets, there's just something structurally that they're going to have to fix first before they really can make these investments. But I think there's some real great things that are happening as well. I mean, especially if you look at Poland and the Baltic countries, the Nordic countries are all extraordinary. Germany, to be quite honest, is really pacing this. They have committed in the next 4 years to be at the 5%, and those next, you know, that's remarkable. And you know, but we're going to see as this plays out. Certainly, I'm going to continue to press and to make sure that our allies are investing and doing the year-over-year growth. But so far, so good. But we're not patting ourselves on the back, and we're certainly not giving out participation trophies right now. We are making sure that everyone is doing the hard work, because it's not just spending money. I mean, the 5% is probably the best way to calculate whether or not a country is investing enough in defense. It really boils down to capabilities. It really boils down, we have capability targets at NATO that says that if war breaks out, let's hope it doesn't, but if war breaks out, this is what you're going to bring to the fight. And we've gone around the entire alliance, all 31 other allies and the United States, and said, okay, this is what we're expecting from you. And there is certainly a capability gap right now that is what this 5% was calculated to fill in over the next decade. The national security strategy, for as poorly as it was received, I think ultimately really identifies just the critical nature and importance that Europe and our allies in Europe, provide to American security. And you're seeing those discussions play out, whether that's, in the discussion about Greenland or so many other things, as we talk about protecting the Arctic region, as we talk about how we counter China and how economically, now that we were talking about backstage and on today's tour, how Europe is running a $500 billion trade deficit alone with China. And, the United States has receded from that. There's so many issues, but that national security strategy, I think, just puts in words so much of what President Trump was talking about on the campaign trail and now in his first year.
Ambassador Rose, I see you nodding. Poland, of course, a serious player in defense, has invested heavily, is a frontline state. What's your experience been in Poland so far?
Well, it's been extraordinary. Now, I will simply reiterate what Ambassador Whitaker has said. The mischaracterizations in coverage, reportage of the national security strategy were not simply wrong, they were flat out an inversion of actually what the document was. We're not anti-Europe. We want to save Europe. We are the children of European civilization. They're our parent culture. To watch Europe go down the tubes would pose great and grave risks to the United States. The good news is that the answer to every significant existential crisis inside Europe is in Poland. I have the easiest job in the United States Diplomatic Corps because Poland is not simply the anchor of the Eastern Shield of NATO. It's a country that's already met and surpassed its defense commitment and requirement. It already spends 5% on GDP. It already has closed its border. It already banishes illegal migrants. It already has opposed woke culture and woke ideology. And this is from a bipartisan perspective. This is both the so-called liberal governing coalition and the conservative right-wing opposition. I'll say this to the quote-unquote left-wing conservative governing coalition. I wish to heck we had left-wing liberals in America like we have in Poland, because they're all committed to exactly the same thing. I think the answers to all of Europe's problem, it's the problem of cultural erasure, which you indicated earlier. It's real. All the national security strategy did was tell the world what time it is. It was a strategic clock. Everything that was in that document was accepted by everybody in Europe as being a fact. It was only when President Trump had the guts to articulate it that it became a problem and a source of great dispute and angst.
Ambassador Popolo, you're in the Netherlands. What's your experience been, and how do you see the Netherlands capability ramping up, and what challenges and opportunities are you spotting there?
Well, it's fantastic. We have an incredible relationship with the Dutch. Many, or maybe most of you know that our relationship goes back 250 years. They were literally the first country to recognize the United States with what's called the first salute down in St. Eustatia, where a cannon on land fired a salute shot at one of our ships during the Revolutionary War, which is the way that you signify that as a sovereign nation. So we have a very long and involved history with the Dutch, obviously going back even farther than that to to New York. They're very serious about the commitment. Thankfully, I think for those of us in the Netherlands, but frankly for every NATO country, Secretary Rutte, who is the Secretary General of NATO, is Dutch. He and Matt have built a great relationship, and he and the President have built a great relationship. And so the Dutch are in the forefront. They're a country of 18 million people, but they are very focused on being a good NATO partner. They've already agreed to take their military from 80 to 120,000. They're going to hit the 5%. We just had an election in the Netherlands in October, and every one of the coalition partners reaffirmed that 5% target. They're discussing how they're going to pay for it. Are they going to raise taxes or cut spending? But the entire country is focused on that. And of course, Russia attacking Ukraine has really put a real spotlight on the need for Europe to step up, as we've said, as has the national security strategy. But again, I'll give Ambassador Whitaker kudos here that he has really done a good job. The President has done a good job of marshaling all 32 countries in one direction. We have to see ultimately what happens if they live up to their commitments, but I think from the Dutch perspective, they will.
Ambassador Merrick, you came into your role with an investor background. What's your experience been in the Czech Republic? And to you and the other ambassadors, what needs to change, if anything, when it comes to procurement to enable speed, to enable U.S. companies to compete fairly, and to have a playing field that's conducive to the kind of cooperation that's sought after?
Well, first of all, Czech Republic's been a great partner of the U.S. They have the history where they know aggression and oppressors when they've seen it. They were occupied by Nazi Germany longer than any other country, and they had 40 years of Soviet rule. So they know it when they see it. So some of the things that they did right away, they've gone to migrated from 100% Russian natural gas to zero. They completely eliminated the Huawei equipment in their 5G network. Right now, they're supplying half of the artillery shells that are going into Ukraine. They've done a lot on cyber. So they've been very, very good partners. But like we've heard before, I viewed the national defense strategy and is really, it's an invitation more than anything. It's a path forward so how the United States and Europe can be full partners. There's a lot of complexity in it because we're dealing bilaterally with our country, ourselves with Czechia and everyone else with their country, but then also they're a member of the EU, they're a member of NATO. So it's almost like you need AI sometimes to figure out all the matrixing of relationships. So, as Ambassador Whitaker said, these countries need to learn how to grow their economies more than they have. In 2008, the United States GDP and the EU GDP were about the same. And I think right now the US is about 2/3 to 70% larger. So in order to fund these defense expenditures, they're going to need to find a way to grow. Now, part of that is that these defense industries that we're experiencing could be part of that Europe can make some of the things that will help it to rearm. So as an investor, we're thinking about it that way, but we go back to they really need to find a way to grow their economy. The Hague commitments were great. I view that kind of as like a New Year's resolution, and you need an accountability partner with your New Year's resolutions to keep them forward. So one of the roles as an ambassador is to be that accountability partner, but also at the same time, some of these companies that we've met here just in the last few days, so many of them based out here in California, are ways really to bend the cost curve. I came from the telecommunications background, and I just recall that a lot of countries, when they had the telecommunications revolution, bypassed landline and went right to wireless and cellular. And I kind of see the opportunity. I think some of the countries like the Czech Republic might think that they have to invest in these major weapons systems like the U.S. has, and they have committed on the F-35. But I think we're seeing some of these new innovative companies that are bending the cost curve and are able to provide tremendous capabilities at much more affordable prices.
So Ambassador Whitaker,
I wanted to pick up on that foreign military sales thing. It's interesting. I think this is our chance to do major reform, and I mean, your experience in the Department of War policy shop. I'm sure like you've heard a lot about FMS and its challenges
And in the industry before that,
yeah,
it was
well,
not
and,
easy.
and that's what, and I guess what I'm going to say is I spend a lot of time in Europe with our European allies and in Brussels, and I hear a lot of complaints about FMS. And then I go on a business technology tour here in California and in Texas, and what do I hear about? I hear about foreign military sales and how it's like actually lost people business because it's too cumbersome and their customers just give up because they don't see a way out of the complexities. President Trump has signed some executive orders. The Department of War is working very hard on a streamlined process, but we have to do so much more, especially because the need for capabilities. I mean, it has been reported that Russia will be able to, at the conclusion of the war with Ukraine, will be able to rearm and be ready to go again in another 3 or 4 years. Obviously, we're all familiar with what China has said about a 2027 date to be prepared to make a move on Taiwan. So, I mean, certainly there's a huge demand signal from industry for weapons. At the same time, our industry is not responding as quickly as possible. That's another reason why I'm pointing to innovative companies that are willing to scale, are willing to say we need to throw away the last 50 years of how we've done this and look for ways to make things cheaper at scale and actually be able to deliver more payload downrange. And we've seen a lot. I mean, this week so far has been really encouraging that companies are thinking about that and making a huge difference. And now so much of it is we just have to fix this procurement problem, both at the Department of War and through foreign military sales and direct military sales as well. And again, I think we have smart people working on it, but this is our chance. And shame on us if we don't get this fixed as soon as possible.
So especially for the press listening, you're clearly pointing to a problem that we have to fix as the United States. So this isn't about pointing blame necessarily just outside of the United States. What are some of the other obstacles that need to be broken through? Each of you came from the private sector. If you weren't in your government roles, what would give you pause or excitement about the opportunity here? But what has to change to achieve this vision?
All of the things that we're currently working on, whether that's rare earth metals, magnets, what the Chinese have done to corner the market there. We also need to trade protectionism, especially European trade protectionism. I mean, they have the SAFE facility that provides loans to acquire military equipment, and they put European content restrictions on that. There's been a huge discussion on these Ukrainian funds, this 90 billion euro facility that they're working on the details of right now, and what the requirements are going to be under that. And it's just, the free market works. I see my friend Mike Milken in the front row here. I mean, he understands the free market works, capitalism works, and we just need to sometimes get out of the way and let the market, especially in this regard, let companies innovate, let companies scale, let the capital flow to good ideas, and at the same time, make sure that the United States and our allies are strong. Because again, as Ronald Reagan taught us, and Donald Trump certainly believes as well, that strength is what's going to guarantee the peace.
So in terms of a little bit more, did you want to jump in, Ambassador?
No, this is, it's killing us even with our own allies. In Poland, for instance, Poland's made a commitment by 2030 to have 1,000 tanks. We're unable to fulfill that. We're unable to meet that. They just placed a $30 billion order for Korean K2 battle tanks, which are very good tanks, by the way. They're not as good as our M2A1 Abrams tanks, but our inability to ramp up production, to massively scale, to bend the cost curve, a term I've heard this week probably 75 times, is it's imperiling our defense industrial base. The problem is, and the president's executive order I think, spelled this out that was released last week. We have monstrous, mammoth, and they're fabulous companies that control defense procurement, the majors, the primes. I'm in Poland, as are my colleagues in their countries. I'm there to sell America. And if my country wants to spend, tens of billions of dollars buying F-35s, that's terrific. I want to sell them. But to further extend their dollars, or their zlotys in my case, to further prepare, to further stand up local defense capacity is absolutely critical. Poland is the only country in Europe with a booming economy. It grew at 4.5% last year. The rest of the EU is basically flat. Since 2000, next to China, Poland is the fastest growing economy on earth. They've never had a recession since the end of communism. Yes, absolutely. They've never had a recession since the end of communism. They grow every year. And part of that growth, a large element of that growth, refers to something Ambassador Whitaker said earlier. And that is, they understand the nexus between economic growth and defense capacity and capability. Without economic growth, they can't afford to build their defense capacity to the extent that it exists today. So what we've seen this week, what Ambassador Whitaker and his team have enabled us to see this week, is one of the most eye-opening experiences I personally have ever had. We are at the cutting edge. We have technologies that would make James Bond blush. Once the door is opened, and once we can see behind the curtain, the very definition of warfare has changed and will change forever. There's nobody that can out-innovate us. There's nobody that can out-create us or out-produce us. We simply need the will, the wherewithal, and the resources to transform dinosaur institutions into vibrant, productive, massively capable enterprises, the likes of which we've seen this week.
Ambassador Merrick.
To me, I'm incredibly optimistic about all this, and it's really just for one reason. I'm from Texas, and we like to make fun of Californians, and I'm sure it kind of goes both ways. But we all acknowledge that the center of technology in the world is here in California, along the coast. And to me, it's the culture change that makes me so optimistic. That you see, we've met these young men and women that are thinking about solving problems in the defense tech way in the area that we've never seen before. And we see the ecosystems of capital and so on supporting that. And it's not, those same smart people maybe 10 years ago were trying to build some consumer app, and today they're trying to solve real critical warfare-related problems. And just meeting, and we have a little joke that, can we top the last resume that we saw where someone was a SEAL, then they went to Harvard Business School, and then they were in the Peace Corps, and then they saw a problem with radar, and now they're solving that. And just that culture change where here in the technology world, people are embracing solving real problems that help make America safer, stronger, and more prosperous. To me, it's a question of details, but we're going to win when this is all said and done. So,
well, let's baseline on the specific capability areas. Obviously, AI is all over the news: space, cyber, missile defense. Are there particular capabilities or areas that you think are especially imperative right now, or that are either particularly exciting or challenging in your respective host countries?
I would say across Europe, and you've seen this iterate so quickly in Ukraine, but counter-UAS. I mean, that's everywhere. You can, with very low dollars, take out, you have a swarm of 40 drones, and we have very limited ability to defend, so whether that's militarily, whether that's a football stadium, whatever. We have got to figure that out. And again, you've seen in Ukraine, and I would maybe just cycling back just briefly to the last conversation, when our countries are trying to order and they're given timelines into the 2030s, that's a challenge. So we've got to figure out how this thing gets going more quickly. And I more comfortable this week that there are entrepreneurial ways of doing that. But the counter-UAS system, I think, keeps everybody up at night.
To paraphrase loosely, basically the implication of what you and others are saying comes from what President Reagan said, which is the problem is actually the government, right? And the associated procurement rules, because the talent is there, the capital is there, but we have to get out of our own way, it sounds like. I see the Ambassador Rose nodding. So.
Yeah, and if you're gonna invest in a massive operation to build these systems, weapons, you need signals from the government that they're going to fund this
multi-year contracts.
Exactly. So this goes back to your point about procurement. We have to give the capital is there and the technology is there, but if the government's not willing to commit beyond the next CR to it, I feel for our defense production.
In your 50 investments prior to your current role, were you light on defense precisely because of problems like that?
No, because I think that there's so much money flowing into defense right now that I think there are going to be solutions. But I would say the way the government buys is a challenge.
Great. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. Obviously, of course.
I mean, Joe's absolutely right. Counter UAS and how we solve that and how we protect our warfighters and our exquisite systems is, because if a $20,000 drone can take out a $100 million F-35 sitting on the ground.
Or what the Ukrainians did in Russia with the
fly trap. Yeah, and so certainly that is important. And we've seen, I have personally seen, in addition to this tour, where we've seen microwave technologies and kinetic technologies and missile technologies. I've seen other things being exercised and demonstrated.
Directed energy.
Yeah, there's a lot of solutions to that, and so I think we're on our way to probably making that not as big a threat as it might appear. And one of the things I guess before I tell you where else we need to innovate, one of the other places where we need to make sure we don't fall into the trap is fighting the last war. And the way Ukraine and Russia are fighting is not how the United States would fight that battle. It's Ukraine obviously was under-resourced and doesn't have the capabilities of the United States of America. So obviously air defense, all domain air defense, including counter drones, but missiles, hypersonics, we're going to have to find ways to address that. And we've seen some extraordinary technologies that need to be scaled, that need to be adapted, tested. All these things, are exciting, but at the same time, they're not scaled and there's not magazine depth. The other place where we really need, and in Ukraine has demonstrated this as well, just in magazine depth is deep strike, getting payload deep across the forward line of defense. And so we've seen some tremendous and interesting technologies in that this week. And so, it's just, there's an all of the above approach, but at the same time, as I talk to, the generals at the Pentagon and the folks that are thinking about the future, it is artificial intelligence, it is autonomy. The vision is, the front line is most likely going to be robots, whether it's subsea, sea surface, whether it's, land robots, or whether it's drones. That front line is going to be a no man's land where nobody can go, and it's going to be protected and fought by trying to take out the other robots. And then behind that, way behind that is going to ultimately be human beings controlling those robots or controlling other exquisite systems. So it's just, some of this, you read like a book like Ender's Game, or you see drone wars and Star Wars, and we can all think that, that's science fiction, but actually that's becoming closer and closer to what it's actually going to look like. And the implications for that, I think sometimes are hard, for human beings to wrap their minds around.
So let's switch gears and talk a little bit about alliance cohesion, alliance unity. Obviously, Greenland has been massively in the news, including today with the meeting the Vice President had with the Secretary of State and the Danish Foreign Minister and his Greenlandic counterpart. What are you hearing from your NATO colleagues about Greenland, and what's your latest thinking on that?
Well, I mean, obviously, the president has, made some pretty straightforward declarative statements. Ultimately, what they all surround is the security of the Western Hemisphere, of the United States and the continental United States, and how important it is for Greenland, because for several reasons. One is for missiles, ballistic missiles coming from Russia or China. Those would be coming over the Arctic region, and Greenland would be the first place that those would be intercepted. Obviously, the second issue is as the Arctic thaws and sea lanes open up, the approaches to North America become different than they were when it's complete ice and you couldn't transit those areas. And so those sea lanes and those approaches would need to be secured. And then obviously the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap, where submarines or ships could come through and threaten the east coast of the United States. Greenland is a very important place to monitor and to counter any of that traffic. And so for those reasons, President Trump is absolutely right. The security of Greenland is the security of the United States of America. And
NATO.
And in the entire North Atlantic. It is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. and so, we need to take this very serious and fix it sooner rather than later, because it's going to be a problem in the coming years. Let's, again, I know my readout of today's meeting, it was a good meeting. Everyone was able to, kind of say their positions and talk about how we can work together to solve these challenges. But obviously there was no deal today. But again, I think this is diplomacy, like you said. As Reagan, as you quoted Reagan, this is an immediate communication. The diplomats and diplomacy matters, and this is how these things are worked out.
And I would just add to that excellent summary. There is no way Greenland, Denmark, and even NATO can protect Greenland alone. So there has to be a solution that involves the United States, and I think the president's been clear on that. And then there's the issue of rare earth minerals, that what frankly we need and is not too far away is in Greenland, and they also don't have the capacity to get those out of the ground, to refine them, and to get them into commercial. So who are we relying on instead? We're relying on China. Mm-hmm. So those two threats to me are massive: the inability of NATO or Denmark, Greenland to defend itself, and then where are we going to get these rare earth minerals that we need so that we're not relying on China?
Well, you meant,
you had asked what the response had been in diplomatic circles. I can simply say that the public reaction and the private reaction are two different things. Again, before President Trump, originally in 2019, by the way, this is not in any way a new concept, a new strategy. The United States has been vested in Greenland for 70 years. Its geostrategic importance grows by the day, by the hour. Privately, everybody that I speak with understands and acknowledges that Denmark, as wonderful as it is incapable of providing even a fraction of the resources that will be required to bring Greenland up to standard in terms of its infrastructure, in terms of its ability to extract rare earths. We were speaking earlier. Today, about 70% of the world's rare earths are mined in or by China, and 95% of the world's rare earths, those are the 43 minerals that our government has indicated as designated as being security assets, 95% of those are refined in China. We met with all these innovative defense groups that openly say, as much as they're trying to adhere to our standards for no Chinese involvement in any way, it's very hard to get around. Greenland, according to geologists, is the largest source of recoverable rare earths outside of China. If we're going to compete with China, if we're going to defend ourselves against China. It's not about controlling China or dominating China. It's about ensuring that China can't dominate us and China can't control us or our allies. So the president speaks truth to power. The president's diplomacy is very direct. It's very refreshing. It's impossible to ignore because he speaks with such common sense and such clarity. Greenland is indispensable to the protection not simply of the United States, but to the protection of our NATO allies. The stronger Greenland is, the stronger we are, if and when we will assume a more formal relationship with Greenland. That'll help NATO. That'll strengthen NATO. It won't weaken it. They understand that behind the scenes, but publicly, of course, the reaction is very different.
You know, Dave, can I just say one thing? Because all of these discussions presume, and I think one of the challenges of the human mind is we presume that today is going to be like this for forever.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I'm always reminded when I talk to innovative entrepreneurs, like we did, like we've been doing, and will continue to do, is they can invent, they can create, they can find a way to propel without rare earth minerals and magnets. And I mean, they're going to discover ways. You know, if a resource is limited, right, they'll look for another way to do it. And so I think we always. This is why, I more than anything, we have to protect the American system, and we have to protect the American dream. And I know, my friend Mike has this whole center to the American dream in Washington, D.C., and if you haven't been there, you need to go see it because it's amazing. But it is so crucial because it is what it really makes this all possible. And we need to just make sure that we don't smother innovators and entrepreneurs, because that's how we're going to have a future better than we'll ever have. I mean, we live so much better than the generation before us. We live better. We have much wealthier lives than sort of century 2 centuries ago.
Kings
exactly.
and queens. Centuries ago.
And one, we need to be grateful for that. But at the same time, we need to understand what this goose that lays these golden eggs, and it's the American way, and the American entrepreneur and American innovation. And we just need to keep, again, we need to cheer for them. We need to encourage them. They need to be rewarded. And at the same time, we need to trust that they can, figure out how to solve these hard problems.
I'd like us to address China in more detail. Yeah, let's clap to that, of course. Let's go into more depth on China in a moment, but Ambassador Rose, share with us what you shared with me earlier about what the United States and Denmark did in 1917.
1917, right as we entered the First World War, German U-boats were penetrating the Caribbean because, much like Greenland, the Juke Gap, which is Greenland, Iceland, and the UK, in the Caribbean, similar strategic choke points. There was a place called the Danish West Indies that today you might know as the U.S. Virgin Islands. In 1917, President Wilson approached the Danish government, who was at first reluctant, then resistant, then when offered $25 million in gold bullion, decided that discretion might have been the better part of valor. I'll say this, it's not diplomatically correct, but I work for the greatest diplomatically incorrect president in American history. None of the Greenland stuff is going to mean a thing until there's an offer on the table. Greenland in 2009, or Denmark in 2009 granted Greenland the constitutional right to declare independence if it wanted to. 56,000 people in Greenland. All those that we see quoted on CNN and MSNBC saying never, 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 we'll never go to the United States. Let's see what they say when the president offers them $500 billion over a 10-year period, $50 billion a year, divided by 56,000 people. You do the math. That's $9 million a person. I don't think any of this discussion is going to mean a damn thing until there's an offer on the table, and then we'll see where the chips fall.
Ambassador, you and others have discussed in this conversation China. In his first term, President Trump fundamentally changed how China was perceived among our allies and partners. What is your latest sense with your host countries of how the Chinese Communist Party and how it's running the People's Republic of China, how it's perceived, and what are the long-term economic and technological and military challenges that are confronting Europe by virtue of China, and where you see that headed?
How do you want us to go?
Go for it.
Well, thank you, Dave. Great question. So the Dutch are very eyes open now about China. ASML, who you may be familiar with, is one of the most advanced companies in the world. It makes these EUV extra ultraviolet machines that then make chips. So they don't make chips.
You can't have advanced chips without ASML.
Correct. They don't make chips, they make the machine that makes the chips. Well, the Chinese are trying to steal that technology all the time, and so they're eyes open. And then there's another company called Nexperia, which also has been in the news recently. The Chinese, these guys actually do make chips. They make them in huge quantities. They go into the auto industry, is a big consumer of them. The Chinese, it was Dutch-owned, the Chinese flooded the market with these chips, drove the price down, almost bankrupted this company, then came in and they got permission from the Dutch to buy it. And in the last 6 months or so, they've been trying to export the technology, the IP, and machines out of Hamburg, Germany, back to China. So a Dutch court stepped in, one of the directors of the company, the Chinese CEO, director went to court, and they put a restraining order on the company. They replaced the CEO, the Dutch court did, with a caretaker CEO, and now the Dutch and the Chinese are going at it hardcore. So the Dutch absolutely understand the challenge that the Chinese present, and I think that's one more reason I'm frankly confident they're going to step up to their 5% NATO commitment. They see the challenges that this totalitarian country provides.
The Czech Republic's done a great job. As I said before, they have a lot of experience with aggressor nations, and so they knew it when they saw it. They swapped out all the telecom equipment pretty early. There was a relationship between Václav Havel and Taiwan that sort of formed early. So there's been a lot of business back and forth with Taiwan over the years. So on cyber as well, overall they've done a very excellent job.
You know, there's a notion, a sense in our media, in our culture, that it's almost a Marxist sense of history, Marxist determinism, that we're all simply the result and the consequence of forces outside our own actions. I think this building and the man that it commemorates and the man that we work for puts forever to lie that notion. There are rare people in history that change the world, that redeem humanity, that fight evil successfully. This building is one of them because the man it represents, the great Ronald Reagan, changed the world in 1980. And Donald Trump in 2016 and again well, even when he was out of office, there have been these massively tectonic movements that are not deterministically determined. They were bent, they were created, they were formed by two great men, Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. And I think we owe an endless debt of gratitude to them both for the freedoms that we have, for the opportunities that we have, as Ambassador Whitaker said, for the lifestyles that we lead. We're truly living in a blessed era, in a bubble of prosperity and growth and freedom and opportunity, and we can't appreciate it enough. We're the luckiest generation of people in history because we live in the greatest country in the history of the world, the greatest source of good in the history of the world. And the greatest hope for mankind, as Ronald Reagan always used to say, you know, the last best hope of man on earth is right here in the United States.
Okay. Yeah. David. and these three countries, all great NATO allies, share the same sort of sentiment, I think, generally towards China and the Chinese and the challenge it presents. But it was in the first Trump administration that we first started bringing this issue to NATO and educating our allies as to the challenges that China presents and how they do business. And that message was continued on by the Biden administration, and now we're back at it at NATO, and we are always thinking about how China and the challenges it presents. The most interesting thing to me, and it was a little eye-opening, but I visited Ukraine in November, and I was able to go. It was also an innovation tour. I wanted to see how they were doing things and innovating in their defense industry, especially with limited resources. And I asked one of the drone manufacturers, have you thought about Chinese components? Because the word is that China is selling drone components to both sides of this battle and is making money, and they don't want it to end. And they said, we've looked at every piece and part of these drones, and anything that's made in China, we have started making ourselves, whether we're 3D printing it or whatever. But the only, the one thing that they were having a hard time sourcing are the motors for the blades. And but they were determined that they would, find a way to get that, because even Ukraine understands the challenge that China presents from a strategic competition and security standpoint. And so I thought that was a really interesting perspective, and we've asked many of the companies we've visited just about the Chinese components and parts and how they think through that issue, and almost everybody has thought about that issue and is addressing it as quickly as possible. But it's hard because there's just certain industries where there's things that you can't otherwise source.
As our time on stage starts to draw to a close, I'll maybe do a little bit of a lightning round, but on the specific topic of Ukraine, we're approaching the 4th anniversary of that war start. What is your perspective on the way forward in that war for NATO, and what do you see in the road ahead?
Well, the killing needs to stop. President Trump is absolutely right. This war needs to end. It is senseless. 30,000 people are dying in Ukraine in the battlefield.
The numbers are staggering.
It's staggering, and you can't even it's hard to wrap your head around, and it's just, it needs to end. At the same time, I think we're as close as we've ever been. I've said that several times. There is a legitimate proposal on the table that I think there's we're very close. We just need to close the deal. Obviously, this last, just like in football, that last yard in the red zone is the hardest. I think this is, the same idea. I think this last yard is going to be hard, but I feel good. And if we don't get this done, and the killing continues, I don't see another catalyst to end it. But it's very clear from the loan facility that the Europeans just approved that Ukraine will be well funded and be able to stay in the fight for the next couple of years, and we'll pray for peace. But I think this is the time is now.
Another major topic in the news, of course, is Venezuela. Ambassador Popolo, one might not automatically think that that's something you're involved in, but please tell us your latest thinking on what
Sure. So those of you who are students of geography might know that Curacao, Aruba, and Bonaire, all right off the coast of Venezuela, are actually Dutch territory. So I've been very involved both in the open and on the high side, as we call it, with secret information with our government and the Dutch government. And the Dutch they've been good about it. They understand, there's things we do multilaterally, and we will continue to do those, NATO being one of them. But they also understand there are things that we have to do unilaterally, and this is in our hemisphere. We've been very clear Maduro is a criminal. We indicted him, so we're following a legal process. He was delivering drugs in our country. He's literally attacking our country. And the Dutch have been very restrained. Now, it was interesting behind the scenes because before we actually went in, you may have seen that the Nobel Peace Prize winner left Venezuela, landed in Curacao, and then made her way to Oslo. And as was reported, it was not a U.S. government operation. This was reported, so not a U.S. government operation, but with the approval and oversight of the White House. So the Dutch were a little surprised that was going on. So we had a little cleanup on aisle 6, as we call it, letting the Dutch know that we love them, even if their airspace and their runway that they leased to us was used to get her out. But it was great because it was such a happy ending. They couldn't, frankly, complain too much. But the Dutch, I would just say, as you know, a coda to my presentation, that they really are good partners. They want to do the right thing. They believe in America. They occasionally have to wring their hands and kvetch publicly, but behind the scenes, they know there's no one like President Trump who can solve what's going on in Ukraine, who can get all these other deals done. So they appreciate the relationship with America very much.
Penultimate question for all of you as we wrap up. As you reflect on your portfolios, this trip, what would you like our audience, both here in person and online, to take away? What should they remember from each of you tonight?
The future is ours. America is back. Our strength is being restored. Our pride is being restored. Our cultural strength is being restored. Pride in America, patriotism, and that comes through hard work, industriousness, ambition. I have been in the last 3 days, thanks to Ambassador Whitaker and his team. I'm a glass 9/10 empty kind of guy, a pessimist by nature, and Whitaker's almost turned me into an optimist. This has been an absolutely eye-opening, extraordinary visit for me. The best of America truly is yet to come.
Ambassador Merrick.
I would just say it's been great to see this culture change in the defense tech world. I just think that is so incredible and foundational. So that is really great. And then the other thing is that, Europe, they gave us Western civilization. They're our kin. We're each other's kin. And, when you have family, you speak bluntly, but you got each other's back. And what we've done is we've talked about the way forward. There really aren't multiple ways forward. There's kind of one way forward. And it's in true partnership, but sometimes that's hard to do because there's a certain way that Europe has relied on us for a long time, and we're altering that because that way won't work. But President Trump has outlined a way that will work. And so getting them to embrace that in a holistic way in a democratic societies is a real challenge, but one that we're very much excited, and that's a big part of our job.
Ambassador Popolo.
I would build on Ambassador Rose's comment. If you see the entrepreneurial spirit at work in this country, which we did this week, of these folks super bright. Thankfully, we have a great, strong capital markets in this country, so they're getting funding, and they are solving problems at light speed that, frankly, the defense industry historically has a hard time. There's some great big companies that do some things very well, but these guys are incredible entrepreneurs, and we started the day at SpaceX, and Elon Musk has taken the cost of putting a pound into space down by 99%. And if I'm a big fan of Boeing, I fly on their planes every week, but frankly, they weren't getting it done. The space shuttle wasn't getting it done. And here's an entrepreneur who went in on his own dime and built this company. And so I share your sense of optimism. The future of America is very bright if we can continue to not squelch it with too much taxes and too much regulations and crazy government stuff. Our entrepreneurs will out-innovate, and we will outgrow the rest of the world.
Ambassador Whitaker.
Well, I agree. Yes. Give Joe some love. I think three things that are as true today as they were when Ronald Reagan first came on this, was elected president in the 1980 election, and President Trump is clearly pulling those through. One is that America is stronger with allies, especially if our allies are strong as well, and that strength, as I mentioned before, is going to ensure the peace. But I think the most important thing, if you remember when Reagan, reminded us in 1980 when he was elected, it's morning in America, right? I mean, it is like that optimism, that eternal optimism that Ronald Reagan was, that smile, that twinkle in his eye. You know, I mean, I grew up in the 80s, a child of the 80s.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what does Ronald Reagan mean to you? So
Well,
we'll
I mean,
close with that.
so yeah, I mean, Ronald Reagan is really sort of my, you know, my political North Star. It's what I grew up. You know, I love two things about the 80s, the heavy metal, hair bands, kind of and, you know, and what Ronald Reagan did to bend the course and change the course of the United States of America and put us on this path that President Trump is now taking us to the next level. And so I just think that belief in the United States of America, that optimism about the future of the United States of America, I think, you know, we can all doom scroll, we can always get down, we can all, you know, feel bad for ourselves or our children's future, but it's quite the opposite. And that's why, you know, they've all mentioned it, and I'll just conclude with, you know, what we saw so far this week is you know, not only is America back, and not only are our best days ahead of us, but if, you know, I'd be buying America right now because this is a great place, and it's going to only get better.
I think that's a great note to end on. How about a hand for our guests? Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Great.